Hello everyone, welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. In today's session, we are going to have a discussion on 3rd March, the Hindu newspaper. So let's first begin with the list of topics that we have today for you. First, looking at the topics that we'll have a kind of detailed discussion on, there are 3 topics here. We have the resolution against centre's border plan, what will Gaganyaan change for India, and why did the court penalize Patanjali? So these are the 3 articles that we are going to discuss. Now actually these are all articles that we already have had discussions on in some of the previous sessions, but there are certain important things, there are important areas which we have not covered on those sessions. So we'll try to cover these areas that we did not cover in the last part. So we'll do that and I'll give you the context of each and everything. Then after, there are all these articles. Now some of these articles, they have a basic, where you need a basic understanding, where there are only 1 or 2 topics that you'll need to understand what they are discussing about, and more often you'll see that these are also topics that you can write or you can use while writing your answer also. So I'll tell you when these articles come, how exactly can you do that as well. So these are the articles that we have today. Now starting with the first article, and this first article is there on the FAQ page of the Hindu, that is page number 15. The resolutions against centre's border plan. Now this article, basically when we talk about this article is trying to highlight some of the issues with regards to what we have seen with the controversies around the fencing of the eastern borders with Myanmar. And that is where we have seen that there are a couple of states which have been opposing it, and there is some state which is also in the favor of the fencing. So we'll try to understand what are the various aspects of it, a brief into also the history of what has happened until now, and some of the key areas or key things that we need to understand. So first, what we see, it has been listed in the article as well, we see that Mizoram Assembly on 28th of February sorry, Mizoram Assembly on 28th of February, they actually passed a resolution, and this resolution is based on how exactly, so the resolution basically is based on that they are opposing centre's decision to fence the border that Mizoram has with or shares with Myanmar. Now what we know is that there is approximately 1600 kilometers long border between India and Myanmar. If you look at this particular figure, what you see here is that there is a long border that we share. So you have these states, you have Arunachal Pradesh, you have Nagaland, you have Manipur, and you have Mizoram. So these are the 4 states that are sharing the border with Myanmar. Now out of this, what we have seen is that Arunachal Pradesh and Manipur, they have shown some favor of in this particular scenario, that they are okay with the fencing of the borders, whereas other 2 states, Nagaland and Mizoram, they are opposing this. So what we need to understand is what exactly do we mean by this free trade regime, and how exactly this free trade regime becomes crucial in this aspect. Now overall, when it comes to the free trade regime, we have seen that it has been there since 2018. In 2018, this free movement regime was established by the center, and this is where we see that they started we started looking at this particular regime. Now there's some issues, so what we understand is that when it comes to the center's decision, on 20th of January, there was an official event in Guwahati, and this is where our Home Minister Amit Shah had announced that there will be a fencing of the border between India and Myanmar, and there will be a scrapping of the free movement regime that was implemented back in 2018. And this, he said, would prevent illegal migration, it will prevent drug smuggling, and it will also prevent cross-border movement of extremists which are also influenced by, who probably would also have influenced the ethnic violence that happened in Manipur in the month of May last year. Now what we see is that there has been support and there has been opposition to this announcement. First, what we see is that Arunachal Pradesh and Manipur, these have been two states who have supported centre's decision, and at the same time Mizoram and Nagaland have opposed it, and Mizoram and Nagaland both have cited historical, social, cultural and trade ties that they have with the people on the other side, and that's why they feel that this is not going to be good for them if this fencing happens. Sorry. So that's why we have seen that there has been a support and there has been opposition to this. Now overall, when it comes to India-Myanmar border, what we know is that border has been a point of contention due to India's fluctuating relations that we have seen with Myanmar since back in 1948. There have been refugee influxes, there have been Chinese influence in Myanmar, and there has been presence of ethnic militants and extremist groups that also have been facilitating all the illicit activities. So overall, that is where we see that this has been something which has always remained in controversy, this border, because of some reason or the other. Now here we also have to understand there are two concepts that we need to understand. That one is about what is the free movement regime, and then a brief into the history also when it comes to this Myanmar border, and how exactly do we say that there have been cultural ties between the people of Myanmar and people living on the Indian side in Nagaland or in Mizoram. So that's why we have seen that there are all these things that we have seen. At the same time, there have been also a lot of discussions about the challenges that we have in fencing, even if you don't consider the cultural ties and the trade ties, etc., that the people of this region have. Because when you look at this entire terrain, this entire region, there will be a lot of connectivity issues, there will be a lot of logistic issues, and at the same time we understand that it is not going to be very easy, because there are a lot of people on our side who also have their agricultural land on the other side, and as soon as the fencing happens, these people will completely lose control of those lands. So that's why it is not going to be easy to even think of something like this. We do understand on one hand that it is very essential when we look at the security perspective, and when we look at the drug movements or illegal wildlife part movements, etc. But overall we have seen that this has been one area of concern also for India. Now overall, when it comes to the understanding of free movement regime, first we need to understand what exactly is this free movement regime. Free movement regime is something that came into existence back in 2018, and this was a part of, you can say in a manner, India's Act East policy. Now what it does is that it allows a free movement up to 16 kilometers along the borders. Up to 16 kilometers of the cross-border movement will be allowed without a visa, and that's why this agreement was brought to facilitate all the local border trade or improving the access to education and healthcare for the border residents, and at the same time it would also have helped in strengthening the diplomatic ties that we have with Myanmar. So that also is one way of looking at that, why exactly did we go with this. And under the agreement, the individuals were also allowed to live here up to 2 weeks of time, by getting a 1 year border pass. That you can get a 1 year border pass, and up to 14 days of time you can remain here. So apart from, you can say, this particular stretch, what we see is that overall when it comes to the border, I mean, when we talk about the free movement regime, we understand that this free movement regime has been taken into account so that we can facilitate the movement, we can facilitate the trade, etc., and facilitate the cultural ties as well. But at the same time, what we also understand is that this is an area where fencing is not going to be that easy. Until now, what we have seen is that apart from a 10-kilometer stretch in Manipur, the India-Myanmar border through the hills and the jungles is completely unfenced. And at the same time, the security forces also have for decades grappled with members of a lot of extremist groups, and who have been carrying out hit and run kind of operations from their from the other side of the border. And then we have seen that they have had their bases in Myanmar. So they have bases in the Myanmar, and especially there are two areas, there are two regions where whether it is the Sagaing region or the Chin region. These are the regions of Myanmar from where they would operate, and they would come into India, do whatever they want to do, and then they would go back. So that's why what we have seen is that the ease of cross-border movement that has happened, because of the ease of the movement that has happened, even before the free movement regime was in place, was very often flagged as inward trafficking of the drugs and also outward trafficking of the wildlife body parts. So that's why the trigger for the rethink of the free movement regime was also the conflict. In a manner, you can say that we have seen, apart from these reasons, the conflict that we saw in Manipur, where we have seen that over the past decade, the Manipur government has been expressing concern over the influx of a lot of Myanmar nationals, and a kind of, you can say, they have seen it as a controversy with regards to the various communities that have been living in that particular area. And at the same time, they also called for something like an NRC that was also going to be in place for Assam. So that's why we have seen that there have been all these cases, and there have been all these discussions in the past with regards to the fencing of the borders as well. And even we see that in the month of September last year, the Chief Minister of Manipur, he also had blamed all the ethnic violence that happened in Manipur to this free movement regime itself. So that's why we have seen that there have been all these issues, and there have been all these concerns that have been raised with regards to the free movement regime. And at the same time, we have seen that during the COVID time as well, we see that during the COVID-19 lockdown also, there were a restriction that was put, and this free movement regime was suspended back then as well. And then after that, in 2021, again we see that there was we know that there was a military coup that happened in Myanmar, and after that we have seen that there have been a lot more issues happening across the borders. And this is where we see that there is a kind of a call that this is an area that should be fenced. So that's why we have to understand the context of where the government comes from and what exactly are they thinking about this. When you look into the history of this region, this is where you'll understand why there is also so much of backlash from the people of this region, that they don't want the fencing. So what exactly happened, if you look at this, this is a representation of the Treaty of Yandabu. So this was the Treaty of Yandabu. Now this is something that came into existence in 1826. Now, sorry, the Treaty of Yandabu basically becomes a very historic agreement which ended in a manner, or which came into existence at the end of the First Anglo-Burmese War. And the war that lasted between 1824 to 1826, that was the first of the three wars that was fought between the British East India Company and the Kingdom of Burma back then, which later became Myanmar. And this treaty was signed in 1826, and we see that as a part of this treaty, there were some things that changed permanently for this region. First thing, the Treaty of Yandabu in a manner concluded the First Anglo-Burmese War, and this was fought in these disputed territories that we had in the northeastern India and the northwestern Burma region at that point of time. And at the same time, what we see is that as a part of this treaty, the Kingdom of Burma had agreed to concede several territories to the British East India Company back then. And that is where we see that the areas of Assam, Manipur, the Jaintia parts, all these basically came as a part of this territory, and then it became Indian parts from that sense, you can say. And then Burma was also required to pay almost 1 million pounds of sterling to the British back at that time, and this was a significant amount for that point. And this is where we see that in a manner it started the problems for Burma in the 1800s itself. And then after that, what we see is that the treaty also asked for the release of all the prisoners and the prisoners of wars, etc., who were there in this particular war. And in a manner you can say this also led to the groundwork for establishment of the diplomatic relations between the British East India Company back then and the Kingdom of Burma. So this is where we see that this all happened back in 1826, and in a manner this had a huge negative impact on Burma. The loss of territories, the imposition of the indemnity, and then all the losses that they had to suffer, all the lives that they had lost. We saw that it had a very profound impact on the Burmese kingdom, and it contributed to a lot of economic difficulty and a lot of internal strife in Burma. So overall, that's why we see that there was a lot of issues that started for Burma at the time of this particular treaty. So that's why we very often see this treaty as the beginning of the British colonial influence in Burma, and eventually it is something that also led to the annexation of Burma later on by the British Empire, and it was almost at the end of the 19th century. So overall we see that there was a significant change that happened in the landscape or the political landscape of the northeastern India as a part of this particular event. So that is where we see that the history comes from. Now also understand why Mizoram and Nagaland especially are opposed to the ending of the free movement regime. What we have seen is that, for example, the Mizoram chief minister, he said that the government does not have the authority to even stop the center from fencing or the border between India and Myanmar, and that is where because there is a perceived security threat, and he said that that's why he wouldn't be able, as a state, they wouldn't be able to do much. But what he also pointed out is that the border was imposed by the British to divide the people who live in this area, especially people belonging to the Zo ethnic stock. So they basically talk about the Zo community or the ethnicity, the people who belong to. So what he said is that the people or the Mizos, they share ethnic ties with the Chin people who are across the border. So that's why he talked about the Chin people who live across the border, and he said that in a manner we should have the right to live together. So the Nagaland government also, where we know that BJP also is a stakeholder, that also basically there also we have seen that there has been some issues with regards to the same, where we saw that in Nagaland the voices are that in a manner it's a regressive policy that the government of India is taking, and it is something that will maybe lead to more conflicts in this region. It is very crucial for India to acknowledge that there is a history that we have between the people living on this side and that side of the border, and in a manner it is also believed that the British exactly had the division happening at this point because it would have divided the people of the same community into two different nationalities. So that's why we need to understand that even in Nagaland, a lot of communities that live on the other side of the border in Myanmar, they are said to be in a manner that they are they are supposed to be a part of the same Naga community that live on this side of the land. So that's why we see that there are a lot of issues in this particular scenario. So overall, for example, there is the Chindwin River in Myanmar. So between the Chindwin River in Myanmar, and on other side we have the Saramati Mountains. So between the Chindwin River and the Saramati Mountains that we have in India. So between these two areas, in a manner they say that this is an area that belongs to the Nagas. So that's why we see that there is a controversy that they all have shared ethnicity, and hence they should be allowed this particular movement. So that's why we see that there are these oppositions that we actually see in this particular area. Moving on to the next topic, and this is about the Gaganyaan mission. Again, we have discussed the details of Gaganyaan mission in our previous lectures as well. All the details of Gaganyaan mission, for example, I would suggest you to also go through the analysis that we have done on 26th of February on 26th of February, we have done a detailed analysis on the Gaganyaan mission and the various aspects of Gaganyaan mission. So, and we have been repeating the story. Even on 28th of February, again we have done the discussion on the Gaganyaan mission, and we have been doing these discussions because every second, every third day now we see that the Gaganyaan mission has been in the news. Now, overall, when it comes to the Gaganyaan mission, there are few things that just to set the context of what we are talking about. On 27th of February, we saw that the Prime Minister announced the final shortlist of the astronaut candidates for the Gaganyaan mission, and this is where we are aiming for a 2025 crewed flight in the early 2025. Now, what we know is that the Gaganyaan mission is ISRO's human spaceflight mission, and it is intending to send Indian astronauts to the low Earth orbit using Indian launch vehicle, that is the GSLV or LVM-3. Now, the testing of crucial technologies for the human space flight has been done. It has showed that it is now that India has the capability of going into this domain, and overall we saw that apart from that there were other announcements and discussions also done. So for example, launching of Indian space station by 2035, landing an astronaut on the moon by 2040, and so all these things basically were also discussed. So what we understand is that when it comes to this Gaganyaan mission, this is in a manner going to be a technology demonstration mission, that it is going to demonstrate that India has a capability to launch humans into space and have a good capacity to bring them back safely. At the same time, this mission will also have a robot called as the Vyom Mitra. We have discussed about this as well, that the Vyom Mitra robot will be sent as a part of this mission. And overall, this mission, there is something that I wanted to discuss here, that this mission is going to have two major parts, one called as the crew module and the other one called as the service module, and both these together will make up the orbital module. So overall what we have seen is that there are a lot of discussions and there are a lot of testing that have been done as a part of this mission, and that's why, I mean, if you look at the test, you will see that the tests go back in time to almost 2007. That in 2007 for the first time there was a technology that was tested which is related to the Gaganyaan mission, and then later on it was carried on with all the other tests as well, and by 2017 we were ready with all the tests, where we see that the announcement was made by the Prime Minister, and then after that 2018 the money was also sanctioned to this, and then after that we started with this particular event. Now overall, just understand this, that the Gaganyaan mission basically has something called as OM, or the orbiter module, orbital module, and this orbital module has two parts. One is the crew module and one is the service module. Now this crew module, basically the main purpose of the crew module is going to be the habitable section that is designed to house all the astronauts, and this is where all the astronauts will live. They will work during their time in the low Earth orbit, and this module is specially designed to support human life in the very harsh environments of the space. So that is basically what the crew module is going to be. It is going to have a capacity to accommodate up to easily 4 astronauts in the duration of this mission, and this is what is planned for about a week. So that's why this is called as the crew mission. So crew mission basically is going to house the astronauts. Alright, it is going to house the astronauts, and then there are various aspects of this crew module. For example, there is something called as ECLSS, or Environmental Control and Life Support System. Environmental Control and Life Support System. So this will be a part of the crew mission. Now this mission basically, or rather this system, will be able to manage the atmosphere inside the cabin, and that will ensure adequate supply of oxygen and removal of the carbon dioxide, controlling the temperature of the module, managing all the other aspects of this entire habitat, whether even waste disposal or fire protection. All these things will be a part of this ECLSS. So just remember that this will try to manage the cabin's atmosphere. Alright, this will try to manage cabin's atmosphere in various different aspects, all right, in various different ways. So that's why oxygen supply, removing carbon dioxide, controlling the temperature, waste removal, fire protection, all these will be a part of this particular system, environmental control and life support system. Then apart from that, we see that there are other aspects of this crew mission as well. So there will be a crew escape system. We also have the crew escape system. So this crew escape system basically will be deployed in case of any malfunction. Any case of malfunction during the rocket's ascent, the system will allow the astronauts to safely escape out of this module, and that's why it will be very critical safety feature which has been designed to protect the crew in case of emergency. So that's why crew escape system, it will help in case of emergency, in case of malfunction. In case of any malfunction, it will help all the astronauts to come out. And at the same time, there are parachutes also that have been deployed as a part of this crew module, where we see that the parachutes will be designed to slow its descent back towards the earth after the re-entry, and that will ensure the safe landing of the crew. Then after that, we have the service module. The service module basically contains the system which is necessary for the orbital module's operation in the space, and that is something that will you can say all the other areas excluding the habitable areas will be called as the service module. And this is where the primary function will be to support in the functionality and the technical aspects. So overall, that's why we see that service module basically will help the orbital module's operation. So this will help orbital modules operations. Alright, it will help in orbital modules operations. So here it will have, for example, the propulsion system. This will be the one that will be used to maneuver the orbital module into space, and that's why including the adjustment into the orbit, initiating the deorbiting from its orbit in the low Earth orbit. Similarly, the power supply will be provided here. So it will have propulsion system. It will have propulsion system. Then it will have power supply. It will have power supply. Similarly, we see that all the support systems will also be there. The thermal control systems, the communication systems, all these things will be there as a part of the service module. So that's why this service module will be attached to the crew module during the launch and most of the mission duration. And this is typically, that is something which is going to be detached from the crew module just before the re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere, so that it can allow the crew module to return safely with the astronauts. So that's why this is basically these are the two modules as a part of this Gaganyaan mission. Now, the article also mentions about HSFC, NSIL and InSpace. So let's also try to understand what exactly are these units as a part of ISRO. HSFC stands for Human Space Flight Center. Alright, Human Space Flight Center, and this HSFC is specifically focused on developing human spaceflight capabilities. It will oversee and manage all the aspects of all the human spaceflight missions, including the Gaganyaan mission. Alright, so that basically, just understand this, that this basically has been added as a part of all the units that you have at ISRO, so that it can develop and manage the human spaceflight capacities. So develop and manage human space flight capabilities. Human space flight capabilities. So this is a very new development. In 2019 it was added as a part of the units that you have at ISRO, and it will try to oversee and manage all the aspects of human space flight, even in case of the Gaganyaan mission. So that's why we see that it becomes very, very important, because it is responsible for the development of the crew module, the life support system, the crew selection and training, ensuring the safety and the success of the manned space missions. All these things are being taken care of by Human Spaceflight Center. Similarly, we have NSIL, that stands for New Space India Limited. New Space India Limited. Now again, this also is a very new development. The government of India made it a part of all the units of ISRO back in 2019. And in case of NSIL, NSIL becomes, in a manner you can say that it becomes a public sector or central public sector enterprise, which will aim commercial exploitation of research and development work of ISRO. Alright, so that's why it will try to scale up the industrial participation in Indian space programs and try to facilitate all the technology transfer from ISRO to the private sector. For example, last year it has been in the news that SSLV, or Small Satellite Launch Vehicle, that has been developed by ISRO will be transferred to the private sector. And in this transfer to the private sector also, NSIL is the one which is facilitating this kind of a transfer. So that's why it becomes very, very crucial, because it will try to exploit, research and development, all the research and development work of ISRO, and research and development work of ISRO, and it will also try to facilitate private participation in this Indian space program. All right, Indian space program, or Indian space sector in a manner you can say. So that's why this becomes very, very crucial, and that's why I took the example of SSLV, that SSLV now being transferred to the private sector is one of the examples of what NSIL is doing. So overall you can say, in a manner, its objective is to commercialize the space technology, manufacture the satellite launch vehicles and satellites, and at the same time provide space-based services on commercial basis as well. What the Parliament had said when it was being developed, Parliament had said that it will look into all the demand-based aspects. It will look into all the demand-based aspects of whatever dealings ISRO is doing. Demand-based means that if, let's say, there is any private company or any other space agency, any other country that wants to use any service of ISRO, they have some service that they want ISRO to do. Let's say somebody wants us to launch their satellites, then in that case they can come to NSIL and ask for it. So that's why we are saying that they are going to look after all the demand-based services which are being provided by ISRO on a commercial basis. So that's why NSIL becomes important. And then we have InSpace. InSpace stands for Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center. Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center. Now this also has been a new development. This was brought into place in 2020, and it acts as a regulatory body to promote, regulate, and also authorize all the private entities in the space sector. Alright, so that way it will try to regulate the space activities in India, and particularly the ones which are non-governmental private entities. So that's why its mission basically in a manner is to attract the private sector investment in the space sector, and it will also try to ensure a kind of, you can say, a level playing field for all the private companies in the satellite launches and all the satellite based activities. Also try to oversee all the authorizations and all the supervision of the private sector activities to ensure compliance, and at national as well as at international levels. So that's why their role also becomes important. So that's why it will help in promotion and authorization of non-governmental private entities. So it will try to support the private companies in this particular area of space sector. Moving on, the next article, again on page number 15, why did the court penalize Patanjali? Now this also has been in the news, and this is again something that we have discussed in one of our previous discussions. In, I think, on 28th of February we had done a small discussion on it. Now what we see is that on 27th of February, the Supreme Court issued a restraint against Patanjali Ayurved, and it prevented it from discrediting allopathy in its campaigns and from advertising its products as cures for chronic conditions. And this was due to Patanjali's misleading advertisements that presented its products as a permanent relief. They have been, especially this word has been highlighted in this case, permanent relief, which in a manner we say that it violates the Drugs and Magic Remedies Objectionable Advertisement Act of 1954. Now, in case of this Act of 1954, we'll try to understand this. So, the Drugs and Magic Remedies Objectionable Advertisements Act of 1954. Now, in this particular scenario, what we see is, if you go into the details of the case of what exactly we have seen, so you'll see that the court issued a contempt notice to Patanjali Ayurved and its managing director Acharya Balkrishna. And this was basically for not adhering to the previous court directions that was given back in November last year. Now overall, this all started with Indian Medical Association when it filed a petition against Patanjali back in 2022 for in a manner what they say is that they are campaigning against allopathy and making exaggerated claims about the drugs, and this is leading to and they basically in a manner are misleading the information. And overall what we have seen is that there have been other cases against Patanjali as well. In 2022 in Nepal also there was a blacklisting of Patanjali Divya Pharmacy that was done, and this was basically for not meeting WHO's drug manufacturing standards. So overall we have seen that there have been these controversies, there have been legal breaches as well. In 2019 also what we found that as a part of the Consumer Protection Act and the same Drugs and Magic Remedies Act, there was a case against Patanjali back in 2019, and there also it was warned against advertising for many of the different diseases that they have a permanent cure, and that's why they were also threatened with a penalty for non-compliance. So there have been all these cases. Now, despite the assurance that was given by Patanjali, we see that they have continued to release these advertisements, making false claims, making claims about the efficacy of the products and how they are better over allopathy. So that is where we have seen that these cases have emerged from. And this particular case, or rather this particular act of 1954, it prevents or prohibits the false medical advertisements, and there are penalties and imprisonments and even fines that could be in place if at all anyone is seen going against this act. So overall we have seen that specifically it has put a ban against the ads that make false claims that the treatment of a certain disease can be done, including for example glaucoma, for which Patanjali has claimed to have a cure. So that's why we have seen that there have been all these kind of issues which are being created from time to time against this particular company. Now overall when it comes to the issues, we have seen that there have been all these issues, and even during COVID we had seen that there were certain issues that the company had faced. So that's why this is where this article comes from. Now overall when it comes to this Drugs and Magic Remedies Act of 1954, we see that this is where two aspects of drugs and magic remedies were mentioned as a part of this act. And overall, it prohibits any kind of advertisement that without any proper assurance or without any proper testing, if it is claiming something else, then in that case it comes under the scenario. Now overall, just understand this, that what do we mean by magic remedy in this particular scenario. So magic remedy according to this act includes talisman, mantra, kavach and any other charm of any kind is alleged to possess any miraculous power for or in the diagnosis, cure, mitigation, treatment or prevention of any disease in human beings or animals, or for affecting or influencing in any way the structure or any organic function of the body of the human beings or animals. So that's why as a part of this act there were a lot of different types of diseases that were mentioned, that you cannot claim to have a permanent cure for this or that unless you have a scientific evidence, a medical evidence to support your claims. But unfortunately what we have seen is that there have been a lot of incidents where these things have happened in the past. So even for example, let's say not only in case of Patanjali, but in case of many of the other companies and many of the other products that claim to be Ayurvedic in nature or even Unani in nature, or there are other remedial aspects also that come into the picture. The entire Ayush ministry has been trying to understand all these, and there have been a lot of cases where we have seen that all these cases have been pointed out by the Ayush ministry. So for example, if you notice here, between August 2018 to June 2021, Ministry of Ayush found 14,876 instances of misleading advertisements of Ayurveda, Siddha, Unani, homeopathy drugs which were forwarded to the state regulation agencies. So that's why we have to understand that there are so many cases that have come forward. And in this regard, when it comes to a company like Patanjali Ayurved, which is supposed to be one of the bigger companies in this segment, it in a manner also becomes their responsibility to carry or be the torch bearer of this instead of promoting some false claims. So that's why this is very, very important for us also to understand that misleading advertisements can have a lot of impact. First, the impact that they can have on public health. They can pose public health risk, because experts also argue that such ads do not only violate the laws, but they also pose a risk to the public health, which can mislead the patients and potentially harm by promoting the false or miracle cures that they can have. So that's why we have to understand the concept of public health risk that can happen here. Similarly, what we have seen is that there have been cases where temporary bans also have been placed on some of these advertisements and products. So overall, we need to understand that there are many issues that something like this can be something like this can cause. So overall, that's why there are a lot of these issues that we need to understand, and that's why the concept of magic remedy and why magic remedy has been mentioned here, that this particular act was an act to control the advertisements of the drugs in very certain cases, so that it can prohibit the advertisements of certain proposals of the remedies which are in a manner claiming to have magic qualities and to provide the matters in a manner that has a scientific evidence as such. So that's why this particular term magic remedy, and the other term, as I told you, that when they are talking about something called as permanent relief, that they are saying that they are going to give permanent relief to some of these, and there is no medical evidence to saying that this might provide permanent relief. So that's why we need to understand all these issues and how exactly they can pose different threats. So for example, as we discussed, that it can lead to public health risks. It can lead to public health risks. Similarly, at the same time, what we also see is that it might also lead to erosion of trust in the people as well. that in these kind of spreading of misinformation can also erode public trust in very legitimate medical practices as well. So for example, we know that Ayurvedic medicines, for example, they are very beneficial in a lot of ways, and that's why we have seen that it has been a part of the traditional medicine culture of India. So in that case, if let's say there are false claims being made, it might also lead to erosion of trust in public, and people might start thinking that not only this, maybe that also doesn't work. So then in that case, it is going against the traditional medicines in that sense. So that's why we have to understand that it can erode public trust as well. It can erode public trust. Then after that, it can also lead to some of the issues. For example, it can lead to maybe increase of the healthcare cost, that individuals might spend a lot of money on unproven treatments and adding to unnecessary financial burdens to them. And additionally, what we might also see is that these ineffective medicines can lead to increased healthcare costs due to the need for further treatment. Similarly, there are legal and regulatory challenges also that we have here, that such practices also put a strain on the legal and the regulatory policies, and overall it becomes very difficult for the government also to monitor and regulate all the things that are happening and all the misleading claims and advertisements that are there in the market. Similarly, it also undermines a lot of scientific evidences, that in a lot of cases where we know that scientifically something is not possible and there are false claims being made, these false claims can also become very challenging in this situation. So that is also there. Then in that case, in one case, you can also say that they also can cause social harm. They can also cause social harm, because the misinformation can also cause panic or fear or unwanted confidence, which is leading to a lot of social harm. So for example, let's say the vaccine hesitancy can actually result in lower vaccination rates, and we have seen that a couple of years back and how it can play out. Similarly, in a manner, it is also exploitation of vulnerable individuals. People who are vulnerable to these misleading advertisements, they are more likely to be exploited by these companies and with these kind of unfounded claims. And it also leads to, in a manner, you can say it also leads to a global image or reputation damage. That, for example, if you take the Nepal case, where in a manner it is internationally highlighted, this is an Indian company not adhering to the laws. So that's why we need to understand these aspects as well. So overall, there are a lot of issues that can be caused because of these kind of claims. So that's why, more importantly, people have faith on these kind of traditional medicines, and people should not lose faith because of these kind of false claims. Now, coming to the prelims based news articles. Now here, today's articles are not very long articles, very short articles we have here. So first is with regards to the Chinese nuclear cargo heading to Pakistan seized. Now what we have seen is that two advanced CNC machines which have been manufactured by an Italian company was intended for Pakistan and probably was intended for Pakistan's nuclear program. They have been seized by the Indian customs in the Mumbai port, and this was seized in January, which was going towards Pakistan. Now the shipment basically started from China, and from China it was going to the Karachi port and has been flagged by India in between. Now overall, this seizure was based on the intelligence suggestion that possible proliferation concerns are there between how China is supporting Pakistan in that, and the equipment is believed to be useful for manufacturing very critical parts of Pakistan's missile development program. So that's why the consignment has been examined by the experts in the DRDO, and then after that it was seized. The custom officers also revealed that this particular shipment has been under surveillance for a very long time, since I think March of last year, and this is where they actually had flagged it before, and that's why they were following it since then. And overall, we have seen that there have been these kind of cases in the past as well, where we saw that China in 2020 also tried something similar, which was also seized, and these equipments could also be used. We know that we suspect that these could be used for Pakistan's missile program. and that's why it was being also deemed to be an illegal missile trade, which is violating something called as the Missile Technology Control Regime, because Pakistan is not a part of Missile Technology Control Regime, and that's why as a rule, China is not allowed to provide anything that is something that can help in some other countries' missile program. So that's why, because China is a part of MTCR and Pakistan is not a part of MTCR, so that's why this kind of a transfer, according to the laws of MTCR, is not allowed. But China is doing it anyway illegally, and China and Pakistan, I mean, there are no surprises here that these two countries are doing something which is not entirely according to the laws or international laws. Now, what do we mean by this CNC? So when it comes to the CNC machines, these CNC machines basically are highly sophisticated pieces of equipment that are used in the manufacturing to control the machine tools with precision using computer programming. Now, this kind of a CNC machine, what exactly do we mean by this CNC machine, and how does it help in the nuclear program, for example? So here what we are saying is that the CNC machine is something that operates on programmed instructions without the need for any kind of manual control, and that's why they significantly reduce the human error and enhance the precision in the manufacturing process. And overall what we see is that they are very highly precise and consistent, that the technology here enables the production of very complex shapes also, which might be useful in a lot of different activities. Similarly, what we also see about these CNC machines is that they are very efficient and very productive. That these machines, for example, they can operate 24 hours without any, or let's say with very minimal supervision requirements, and that's why they can help in the setting up of the machinery very easily. And very complex designs also can be produced and managed with the help of the CNC machines. So that's why we see that they many a times, wherever the something doing by hand or manually is impossible, CNC machines can do that very easily. Now, how is this CNC machine important for nuclear program? How does it help in various nuclear programs? So understand this, that they are very precise, they are very versatile, they are very efficient in the manufacturing components. So that's why there are various sensitive parts in manufacturing of nuclear components where they can be very helpful. So for example, nuclear programs will require the fabrication of very highly precise components for the reactors, and that's why, or even in missile delivery systems. So that is where CNC machines can become very crucial, and that's why it is being seized or being captured by India. Similarly, what we know is that when it comes to these machines, they can work with a lot of different types of materials. Different types of materials like whether it is alloys or metals or composite materials, all these things which are very common in nuclear applications, CNC machines can work with all of them, and they can very easily handle very difficult to machine materials, and that's why they become very crucial in these aspects. Similarly, they also reduce the risk of contamination. In nuclear applications, they will ensure the integrity of the components in the machines. So that is also where we see that they would help. They would reduce human intervention and reduce the risk of contamination during the manufacturing process. So that's why we see that there are various ways in which these machines can help. Then another small topic, Shah launches umbrella body for urban cooperative banks. Now what we see is that our Union Minister Amit Shah, he basically inaugurated the National Urban Cooperation, he inaugurated the National Urban Cooperative Finance and Development Corporation Limited. Now this is something that was done by him, and he emphasized that the creation of this was very necessary development for self-regulation and all this future sustainability. What he said is that the importance of the urban cooperative banks will be very huge, and this is where they will also help in upgrading and adhering to all the guidelines set by the Reserve Bank of India. So what he said is that a very significant role of this particular National Urban Cooperative Finance and Development Corporation Limited will be to assist the small banks in complying with all the banking regulation acts, And at the same time, he said that the collective strength of all the organization includes a total of 11,000 branches with 1,500 banks and deposits of worth 5 lakh crores and loans totaling 3.5 lakh crores. So that's why he mentioned all these things, and he said that this is where we'll see that the role of this will be very, very significant in complying with the Banking Regulations Act. So that's why complying with Banking Regulations Act. So that's why he said that it will play a big role in these kind of management. So overall, that is what exactly he had said, and he said that it will successfully, or the UCBs basically, he said that the UCBs have very successfully reduced the net NPAs to almost just 2.1%. They have just reduced it to 2.1%, and that's why it is a very, very important development. Then another small discussion here. Indian Air Force finishes black topping of landing strip near LAC. Now here we are talking about the place called Neoma. This is the place called as Neoma near the eastern Indian border with China, and this is where we have seen that this basically this airstrip now has been upgraded, alright, and there is a paved runway which is now available here. So runway extension has been done, and this has actually been done so that we can start accommodating fighter air jets in these kind of areas. So it will try to accommodate the fighter air jets. In these areas. So that's why we see that this is where the work has almost been completed. There is another work that was paused for winter, and now we see that this work will also be completed by April. So that's why it becomes very significant, and the location becomes very, very significant, because we have seen the recent tensions that we have seen in these borders between India and China, and from that perspective it is a very, very important one. So overall, this runway is also being extended so that it can handle all the types of fighter aircrafts that we have in our inventory. So overall, in a manner, it was, as our Defense Minister Rajnath Singh also said, that it is going to be a game changer for India because of these kind of areas being covered very well now. So that is where it becomes crucial. Then there is this news: Google app delisting cannot be allowed. Now here, although the news is not very significant directly from the perspective of your prelims and mains examination, but these are the kinds of articles where you get a couple of lines from, and if required you can use it somewhere. So for example, what has happened? What we have seen is that Google had delisted some of the apps on its Play Store, and this is where India's Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, Ashwin Vaishnav, he stated that Google's delisting of the Indian apps from its Android Play Store is unacceptable. And there was a meeting that was scheduled with Google, so that with the representatives of Google, to discuss this particular issue. So what we saw was that the apps like Bharat Matrimony or Kuku FM, Naukri, etc., they were removed from the Play Store by Google, and because they were resisting the platform fee that was there on the in-app purchases of the various services that are being provided by these apps. And what we know is that Google charges a commission of approximately 11% to 30% on all the digital goods, and this is where all the controversy starts from. The Supreme Court of India did not extend any interim relief to any of these apps, and this is where we see that the legal battle between them started. So overall, we see that there are these things that have happened, and the Google also had announced that it would delist the apps without waiting for the conclusion of the court hearings. And many of these apps, for example, apps like Naukri, and there is 99 Acres as well, they were restored also on the Play Store after they complied with Google's payment requirements. Now overall, what you have to understand here is that why the government of India is also picking up an issue like this is mainly because this can have a negative impact on our startups, on our startups and many of these apps that are there on Google Play Store, and that is the platform that is important for their business. The bigger companies might still be able to comply and they would not have an issue, but for a smaller company, for a startup, to pay almost 30% of their revenues to Google because the in-app purchases are happening through Google's platform would be very, very difficult to handle, and that is where we see that the government of India has intervened. Then coming to the last article on page number 14, this is managing our resources with artificial intelligence. Now this is an article that we have on our science page in today's newspaper. Now when it comes to this article, it first talks about that when you look at artificial intelligence has both positive as well as negative aspects. That today we see that artificial intelligence is assisting in healthcare, it is helping in environmental forecasting as well, in disaster management it is helping, but at the same time there are concerns. The concerns, for example, a lot of job losses that are happening because of artificial intelligence, the private intrusions or the data misuse that we see. So what he says is that, see, there are positives and negatives, but we need to see that there are areas where artificial intelligence can become very, very crucial. For example, what is being argued is that as India develops, there are challenges with regards to resources, notably the water resources, and the annual issues of floods and droughts across various areas in the country. They can actually find innovative solutions with artificial intelligence. For example, the example of linking of rivers has been taken, that the linking of rivers project, which is aimed at minimizing the water deficit in the context of climate change and unprecedented weather changes or weather pattern changes that we've seen that this is where it can help. And then there are IITs, for example, IIT ISM Dhanbad and the NITs that we have in Tripura and Goa. They have used artificial intelligence to study the river linking in the canal proposals, that how exactly certain rivers can be linked. Then at the same time, the canal intentions, the canals, and how the canals can also become a very, very important part of the mitigating of the floods, that also is being talked about, that how exactly these linking of the river projects can also be handled with the help of artificial intelligence. Then he also talks about how the goal actually should be to achieve multiple objectives optimally, so that when it comes to maximizing crop yield with very minimum water use, this is also where artificial intelligence can help. Then at the same time, the models that have been developed by these institutions, they actually are focusing on improvement of the farm returns without depleting the groundwater or wasting water in the rivers or the reservoirs. And these models are using data from the National Water Development Agency and on all the water levels and crops sowing patterns and economic factors, so that they can suggest the adjustments to the crop choices for better outcomes. And this is where it is also argued that it will also help in the future. The continued cooperation of the detailed data modeling can make a very focused approach towards solving complex problems related to water, and how exactly, whether it is agriculture or weather management, we might see a lot of improvement with the help of artificial intelligence. So that's why it talks about how management of resources can be done with the help of artificial intelligence. We have been talking about various aspects of artificial intelligence. Note it just as one of the additional points where artificial intelligence can be very, very helpful. Now, lastly, looking at the mains questions for today. The first question, if you see, space exploration has entered a new era with increased participation from private entities and international collaborations, shaping the future of extraterrestrial explorations and exploitation. In the light of this, evaluate India's position and strategy in leveraging its space capabilities for national development and its stature on the global stage. So this is where you can talk about all the various aspects of our missions, whether Earth observation or communication satellites or navigation satellites, and various ways in which we have been able to help Indian agriculture, disaster management, Indian society, resource management, etc. So all these aspects can be discussed. And then the international stature, that how missions like Gaganyaan or Chandrayaan 3 or Aditya L1 missions, they are very crucial in establishing India as a global player. So that is basically what you have to discuss in this question. And then the second question, analyze the impact of misleading advertisements in the healthcare sector on public trust and healthcare policies. Discuss the role of regulatory bodies in mitigating these challenges and suggest measures for strengthening the consumer protection against such advertisements. So we have to first point out the problems, and we discussed about some of the problems that can be caused by these kind of advertisements, and then the role of the regulatory bodies, the role of the ministries, and what they can do, what all they have to do, the stricter norms that they have to bring in, how they can bring in scientific studies in each and every drug, and then at the same time also education of the people, and for making people also understand the various aspects of these advertisements and how people should not be misled because of certain advertisements like these. So all these are the things that you can mention in this particular article. So this brings us to the end of today's discussion. Thank you very much for joining. Goodbye.